and welcome to Presby Perk, where we talk about faith and life and everything in between. I'm Pastor Katie. This is Pastor Christian. She's a new minister at ECM here in Manhattan, Kansas. And we've been talking about her experience with refugees in Turkey. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so I served this past summer helping at a refugee resettlement program in Istanbul, Turkey. And that was one of the most both life-giving and discouraging moments, I think, in terms of understanding and recognizing what's at play when people think about refugees, and then what it actually means to serve those who are displaced from their homes. So most of the people that we were serving directly in this particular location weren't even necessarily Syrian refugees, which I think when people think of refugee, that's the first thing that comes to their mind. But many Syrians haven't reached some of these resettlement programs and are still needing just to be served now. So we've heard about it in the news, but there are many communities that came before Syrians that are in great need. For example, those that are fleeing from ISIS in Afghanistan have maybe not made the news as prominently, but certainly are in great need of care. Many women, particularly we worked with women and children, and many women and children are without jobs, without food, without shelter. And so these organizations are really trying to be intentional about finding ways for them to be in a sustainable way of life in these new countries where they don't speak the language, they don't have any family, their community is mostly gone, and they're really starting with nothing except for except for those who are wishing to reach out to them.
And I think a lot of times when we think about refugees, we're talking about the fear that we have about who is a good refugee or bad refugee, or deciphering like who would we take into our home. But as Christians, or even in our larger faith tradition, our history goes back to where we were refugees.
Absolutely.
And we are called to care for refugees.
Absolutely.
So what are some ways that we can care or send a message that we are allies?
Oh, wow. That's a really excellent question. I think one of the ways to do that best, to learn to be an ally, is to feel comfortable talking with people that look different than us and speak different languages than us. I understand and recognize that there's a real fear of other, and so one of the basic ways to not look at someone that looks differently than us or maybe has an accent. I know people have said, when I've spoken with folks from different countries, they said people often make fun of my accent, or I immediately identify that as a different identifying mark. So being an ally means being comfortable sitting with people too, I think, and seeing them as human beings and not just those who have been hurt or abused. I think that's a big piece of being an ally that maybe isn't discussed or understood. So I'm actively trying to understand what it means to be an ally myself. There's not like a stopping point for what that looks like or means. It's not like you get it and then you move on. It's something that you cultivate in your life, and also something you're cultivating in relationship to other people. So it may change when you're working with a refugee from Syria. It may change when you're working with someone who's left Houston, their home has been abandoned. One of the great things that I read about talking about the American context was that there were many people from the country of Mexico who said, we will take the refugees from Houston into our own homes.
Wow.
Because we know you need that, and that seems so ironic because the conversation politically has been around Mexico isn't of America, so therefore we can't help them or support them, and so they really have flipped that narrative in many ways. So being mindful of those types of stories and finding ways to support people that look differently than us. Those are beginning steps to what it means to be an ally, I think.
And perhaps one of the first steps towards reconciliation or coming together over these the struggles that we've had, whether it's racism or with other countries, it's like you said, this idea of cultivating community. How do we cultivate spaces where we can have these conversations and recognize each other's humanity, and recognizing one another as beloved creatures of God? So why don't you respond to our conversation and share how you see maybe a new way we could cultivate community here in Manhattan, Kansas. You can share your comment with hashtag Cultivate Community, or just post your response below, and watch again for the next episode of Presby Perk.